I never meant to see those messages. Sophia had left her laptop open on our kitchen counter while she took a shower. The notification popped up, and my eyes caught my own name. I shouldn't have looked, but something in me knew I needed to. David is just so basic, my wife had written to her influencer friend Amber. He spends his days talking about dead writers while I'm trying to build something real. Sometimes I wonder what I was thinking marrying a professor. My stomach dropped as I scrolled up, seeing an entire conversation where Sophia mocked my career, my passion for literature, and even the way I dressed. Too intellectual, boring, no ambition, these were the words my wife of 4 years used to describe me to her friends. I heard the shower turn off and quickly moved away from her laptop, my mind racing. I'd known things weren't perfect between us lately. Sophia, with her flowing auburn hair and piercing green eyes that once looked at me with admiration, had become increasingly distant as her Instagram following grew. What had started as a hobby had become an obsession, the constant photo shoots, the brand deals, the networking events I was never invited to. That night, I couldn't sleep. While Sophia scrolled mindlessly through her phone beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying those messages in my mind. Was I really not enough? I'd supported her dreams, helped her set up her first professional photo shoot, even used my faculty connections to get her invited to university events she could post about. The next morning, I decided to check her messages again while she was at a content creation brunch. That's when I saw them, exchanges with someone named Mark. A photographer, apparently. The messages started professional enough, discussing shoots and lighting. Then they turned flirtatious. Then explicit. My husband doesn't understand this world, she'd written. He lives in books while we create real art. Mark's response made my blood run cold. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Our private shoot will be unforgettable. I sat there, numb, as pieces fell into place. The late nights, the weekend, networking events. The new lingerie I never saw her wear. The sudden password on her phone. I'm not a confrontational man. My battles have always been fought in classrooms and academic journals. But something shifted in me that day. Not anger, though there was plenty of that, but determination. If I wasn't enough, I would become more. Not for her, but for myself. I closed her laptop and walked to my study. There, surrounded by the books she mocked, I opened my own computer and began to write. Not another academic paper, but something raw and real. The words poured out of me, a story of betrayal, yes, but also of awakening. I didn't know then that these words would change everything. I just knew I needed to transform this pain into something meaningful. Something that would prove I was more than enough. I needed to know for certain. Call it academic thoroughness or just the masochism of a wounded heart, but I had to see the affair with my own eyes. Sophia mentioned a gallery opening in her calendar, one she hadn't invited me to. Just industry people, she'd said dismissively when I asked about her plans. I arrived at the gallery 30 minutes after the event started. Through the window, I spotted Sophia immediately, her copper hair cascading down the back of a dress I'd never seen before. She was laughing, champagne flute in hand, surrounded by her usual crowd of influencers with the perfect smiles and calculated poses. And then I saw him. Mark, tall, with the artfully disheveled look of someone who spends hours appearing effortless. His hand rested on the small of Sophia's back with the casual possessiveness of a lover, not a professional colleague. I watched as they moved through the crowd together. How she leaned into him when he whispered in her ear. How her fingers lingered when she touched his arm. The intimacy was unmistakable, the kind Sophia and I hadn't shared in months. When they slipped out a side door together, I didn't follow. I'd seen enough. The betrayal was no longer just words on a screen but a reality playing out before me. I drove home in silence, no radio, no podcasts of literary discussions that Sophia found so boring. Just the sound of my world crumbling and, beneath it, something else, the faint stirring of words, sentences, paragraphs forming in my mind. At home, I went straight to my study and wrote until dawn. The story poured out of me, a professor whose wife betrays him with a photographer she believes represents the life she deserves. Not autobiography, exactly, but close enough that the emotions felt authentic on the page. For the next week, I lived a strange double life. During the day, I taught my classes on modernist literature, discussing Hemingway's iceberg theory while my own submerged pain fueled my writing each night. I smiled at Sophia when she returned home late, smelling of unfamiliar cologne. I listened to her stories about networking and nodded as if I believed them. "You seem different," she said one evening, looking up from her phone long enough to actually see me. "More distant. Just busy with a new project," I replied, which wasn't a lie. "Another academic paper no one will read." The casual cruelty in her voice confirmed everything I'd seen in those messages. "Something like that," I said, returning to my laptop. The manuscript grew to 50 pages, then 100. I found myself writing with an intensity I'd never experienced in my academic work. This wasn't analysis of someone else's art, this was creation born from my own truth. Meanwhile, Sophia's deceptions multiplied. A girls' weekend, where her friends posted photos without her. A family emergency, that her sister knew nothing about when she called looking for Sophia. I gathered evidence methodically, screenshots, timestamps, contradictions in her stories. Not just for a potential divorce, though that seemed increasingly inevitable, but because the writer in me needed to understand the full narrative of our unraveling. And still, I wrote. The pain transformed on the page, becoming something else entirely, something with power. The university was hosting a literary festival, and for the first time in years, I found myself actually excited about a campus event. Not because of the featured authors, though they were impressive, but because of the publishers who would be attending. "You're getting dressed up for that boring thing?" Sophia asked, barely looking up from her phone as I adjusted my tie. She was sprawled across our bed, scrolling through comments on her latest post, a sponsored ad for some skincare brand that promised authenticity through 7 layers of filters. "Some of us still care about making a good impression in person, not just online," I replied, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Sophia looked up, momentarily startled by my tone, but quickly returned to her digital validation. At the reception, I found myself standing next to a woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense bob. Her name tag read, Elena Winters, Senior Editor, Meridian Press. "So, what do you write, Professor?" she asked after our initial small talk about the keynote speech. "Academic articles, mostly," I said, then hesitated. "And I'm working on a novel." The words felt strange leaving my mouth. I'd never told anyone about my manuscript, not even my closest colleagues. "What's it about?" Her interest seemed genuine. "It's about authenticity in a world obsessed with appearances. About a man who discovers his life is built on illusions." I paused. "And what happens when those illusions shatter?" Elena handed me her card. "Send me the first 50 pages. If it's half as interesting as you make it sound, I'd like to read more." That night, I returned home to find Sophia already asleep or pretending to be. Her phone glowed with a notification. Another message from Mark. "Last night was incredible. When can I see you again?" I should have felt anger, but instead, I felt something like clarity. I stayed up until 3 a.m. polishing those 50 pages for Elena. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in me. I started running in the mornings, shedding the sedentary weight of academic life. I updated my wardrobe, replacing shapeless tweed with clothes that actually fit. Not for Sophia, she barely noticed, but for myself. Elena's response came faster than I expected. "This is compelling work. Raw, honest, and timely. Send me the rest when it's ready." Meanwhile, Sophia's betrayal continued. She'd become careless, leaving evidence everywhere: earrings in her car that weren't hers, she'd borrowed them from a friend, hotel receipts in her purse, a mix-up at an influencer retreat, lipstick shades she never wore. One evening, I found her laptop open again, this time to her messages with her friend Amber. "David's acting weird lately," she'd written. "Working out, buying new clothes. Think he's having an affair." Amber's response: "No way. He's too boring. Probably just a midlife crisis." I should have felt insulted. Instead, I laughed. They couldn't imagine that I was capable of change, of passion, of creating something meaningful. Their world was so small, so focused on appearances, that they couldn't see what was happening beneath the surface. I finished my manuscript the same week Sophia told me she needed to go to Miami for an important collaboration. I didn't confront her about the fact that Mark had posted about his upcoming Miami trip on his public Instagram. Instead, I sent my completed manuscript to Elena with a simple message: "Here's my truth." While Sophia was gone, Elena called. "We want to publish this," she said. "And we want to fast-track it." The months that followed were a blur of activity. Elena and her team at Meridian Press moved with surprising speed. My manuscript, titled Filtered, a novel of authenticity in the age of appearances, was scheduled for release in spring. The marketing team was particularly excited about the timeliness of the theme. People are hungry for something real, Elena explained during one of our meetings. Your book cuts through the noise. Meanwhile, Sophia remained oblivious to my literary endeavors. She was too consumed with her own world, her follow account, her brand collaborations, her secret rendezvous with Mark. Our conversations had become perfunctory, our marriage a hollow performance. I've been invited to speak at a writers' conference in Chicago, I told her one evening. That's nice, she replied absently, not looking up from her phone. I'm meeting with a major beauty brand that weekend anyway. I didn't tell her that the major beauty brand had actually reached out to me for permission to use an excerpt from my forthcoming novel in their new campaign about authentic beauty. The irony wasn't lost on me. In Chicago, I gave my first public reading from the novel. The room was packed not with the usual academic crowd, but with readers hungry for the story I was telling. When I finished reading, the applause was thunderous. A line formed for the advance reader copies the publisher had provided. Your voice is so authentic, one woman told me as I signed her copy. It's like you've lived this story. If only she knew. The first review appeared in a major literary journal, a searing indictment of our culture's obsession with curated perfection. David Mitchell's debut novel announces the arrival of an important new voice in American fiction. My department chair called me into his office after the review was published. Why didn't you tell us you were writing a novel? He asked, both impressed and slightly miffed at being kept out of the loop. It was personal, I replied simply. Advance orders for the book were strong enough that Meridian decided to increase the initial print run. They scheduled a 10-city book tour to coincide with the release. My photo taken by a photographer who was decidedly not Mark appeared in the publisher's quarterly catalogue. Through it all, Sophia remained in her own bubble. She noticed I was traveling more but assumed it was for boring academic conferences. She complained about my absences interfering with her content creation schedule. Apparently, she occasionally still needed me as a prop in her perfectly curated life. The final betrayal came 2 weeks before my book's release. I returned early from a meeting with my publicist to find Mark's car in our driveway. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at our house, the home we'd bought together when I got tenure, the place where I'd once believed we were building a life. I didn't storm in. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and opened my laptop. The pre-order numbers for my book had just come in, exceeding everyone's expectations. My publicist had forwarded interview requests from major publications and talk shows. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, "Where are you? Thought you'd be home by now." I replied with a simple lie, working late at the office. Don't wait up. That night, I stayed in a hotel and finalized my plans. The book would be released in exactly 15 days. The divorce papers were already prepared, waiting in my lawyer's office. After years of living in fiction, the fiction of my happy marriage, I was finally ready for the truth. And the truth, as I'd written in the final line of my novel, would set me free. Release day arrived with a thunderclap of publicity. My face appeared in the arts section of major newspapers. Filtered debuted at number 7 on the New York Times bestseller list, unprecedented for a literary debut from an unknown academic. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with congratulatory messages from colleagues, publishers, and journalists. None from Sophia. She still didn't know. I'd managed to keep my literary life completely separate from our crumbling marriage, a feat made possible by her utter disinterest in my career and her preoccupation with her own image. I returned home that evening with a copy of my book and the divorce papers. Sophia was in our living room, scrolling through Instagram, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her phone screen. We need to talk, I said, setting both items on the coffee table between us. She glanced up, irritated by the interruption. Then her eyes fell on the book, confusion crossing her flawless features as she recognized my name on the cover. What's this? She picked up the book, examining it as if it was some alien artifact. My novel. It was released today. I kept my voice steady. It's about a professor whose influencer wife betrays him with a photographer. The color drained from her face. Those green eyes that once captivated me widened in shock. It's fiction, of course, I continued. But these aren't. I slid the divorce papers toward her, followed by a folder containing screenshots of her messages with Mark, photos of them together, hotel receipts, all the evidence I'd methodically collected. How did you? She began. You were so busy creating content that you never noticed I was creating too. I opened the book to the acknowledgements page. The only person I didn't thank was you, though perhaps I should have. Your betrayal gave me something authentic to write about. Sophia's carefully constructed composure crumbled. Tears streaked her expensive mascara as she flipped through the evidence. David, I can explain, no need. Your explanations, like your Instagram feed, would just be carefully filtered lies. I stood up. I've signed a 3-book deal. There's talk of a film adaptation. Meanwhile, I've noticed Mark has been photographing a new influencer lately. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Instinctively, she checked it, a habit stronger than even this moment of crisis. That might be my publicist, I said. I'm doing Good Morning America tomorrow. The realization of what she'd lost flickered across her face. Not just her marriage, but the chance to be part of something genuinely successful, something real. You can't just leave, she whispered, desperation replacing her usual confidence. We could work through this. I could help promote your book to my followers. I almost laughed at the irony. You told your friends I wasn't enough. Those words changed me, Sophia. They made me find the best version of myself, a version you'll never have again. I left her sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal and the product of my transformation. Outside, the evening air felt clean, purifying. My phone buzzed again, Elena, confirming details for tomorrow's television appearance. As I drove away from the house that had never really been a home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: freedom. The kind that comes from shedding illusions and embracing your authentic self. Sophia had been right about one thing. I hadn't been enough, not for myself. But now, I was everything I was meant to be. And that was something she would never have again.